Alabama is more dangerous now than they were at the beginning of the year, obviously by nature of what they did against LSU. We all saw that clinic they put on in Tuscaloosa. But why are they more dangerous? What makes them more of a problem for the rest of the college football landscape and maybe even the SEC and the college football playoff than what they were earlier in the year? We'll talk about it right now. First things first, make sure you're subscribed, Alabama fans. We had somewhere in the range of 700 of y'all join the party just yesterday, so we appreciate that. If you have not yet subscribed, make sure you're dialed in right here, pushing towards 200,000 subscribers, rather, and we would love to have y'all a part of it. Also, follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at JD Piquel. So why is Alabama more dangerous? Well, I think the first thing you got to look at is the identity they've now established offensively. Like they have more ways they can hurt you, and they're starting to get into a rhythm with what they do attacking you with Jalen Mirloe at quarterback. Can hurt you running the ball downhill. Jason McClellan kind of finding his stride these last couple of games. Jalen Mirloe in the quarterback design run game and also in the ad-lib game. He's sort of taken over, and he just looks like he's more definitive in that sense. I don't know if it's a confidence thing, but it does feel like they are running the Jalen Mirloe offense as opposed to the Alabama offense that Jalen Mirloe was trying to operate. Going into the year, we thought, hey, it'll be an offensive line-driven operation offensively. Maybe that's still the case to a degree, but I think with Jalen Mirloe, what he does getting downhill himself, I think that kind of has been the catalyst for this entire approach with Tommy Rees running the show with Jalen Mirloe as his quarterback. So that's the other part of this. Then on top of that, you have the deep pass game. Like we've seen, if Jalen Mirloe does one thing effectively throwing the ball, it's hitting the deep shot downfield. And you've got guys like Isaiah Bond coming into their own, Jermaine Burton coming into their own. And I still think the scary thing is there's an opportunity for them to get the ball to guys like Isaiah Bond even more in space and kind of hurt you in that game. So all that's to say, the way they're operating right now, firing on all cylinders offensively and kind of found their mojo by nature of how they beat LSU on Saturday night, that's scary for the rest of the college football landscape for a couple of reasons. The first of which being, whenever you find your identity, it doesn't start with that light bulb moment. Like that's not what makes them dangerous. What makes them dangerous is what you do after that. Because finding your identity as an offense is phenomenal and you would like to be there sooner rather than later. But once you find that identity, it's what you can do building upon it. And right now, I think with Alabama and what they've done to this point in the year and kind of putting the exclamation mark on we know who we are offensively against LSU and the way they're going to add more layers to that, that's going to be dangerous the rest of the way. Because to know that something works and then be able to build upon it, early Alabama, they didn't know exactly who they were offensively. Like from the outside looking in, we were at that game against Texas, and they had some things that they thought they could do. They had some plays that they went to, it felt like, and they knew what they thought they knew Jalen Milroe's skill set. But again, it was trying to put Jalen Milroe in this Alabama offense as opposed to cutting Jalen Milroe loose and let him do what he does, which I think we saw really effectively this past Saturday against LSU. So that's kind of the scary part now. When you find your identity and you can build off of it and game plan with it and be able to scheme more for it, for your identity that is, then it goes back to what do you have ingredients-wise? Because the ingredients have never been the question at Alabama. The talent was never the thing holding Alabama back, and we all understood that going into the season. That's the reason why a lot of people preseason had Alabama being a college football playoff team. Some had them winning the SEC, some had them winning the national title. Like that was all based in how much talent was already in Tuscaloosa. Every single individual that's in that locker room right now that signed with Alabama out of high school was a part of either number 1 or number 2 ranked class in the country. They got dudes. And so now that you have the dudes and you're able to put them in position to be successful and you're playing to their strengths and their skill set, again, going back to Jalen Milroe, allowing him to cook how he does, that's dangerous for college football because the multiple styles they can play offensively changes the kind of game they can play. Like LSU, we went into it saying, well, how many stops can Alabama get on defense? That's going to be the question because LSU, they're going to score a lot of points. Alabama scored 42. Mic drop. They set the pace in that game. They were the ones that were firing all cylinders. They were the ones that were providing fireworks. Now, LSU did that as well, and Jaden Daniels, you wish he was able to finish the game if you're a college football fan, but like the point remains the same. Alabama was the superior offense on that day. And Jalen Milroe had the superior performance on that day. And it goes back to, in my mind, them finding their identity and now being able to build on it. And I think it's been a trend the last couple of weeks. And it crescendoed last night, and I don't think they're done. Now, defensively, what was always the question when it came to Alabama? And always is the wrong word, but when you look back to the past couple of games where you saw Alabama underachieve, what were we looking at? The secondary. Game against Tennessee comes to mind. Game against Texas comes to mind. And I say Tennessee going back to last year's game where they lost that game in Neyland Stadium. This year played a lot better. And the game against Texas this season underachieved obviously as well by nature of that final score and Quinn Ewers' box score thrown for over 300 yards. But going back to the point here, I think the defense in that secondary has evolved. And I'll say this, when I watched Alabama on Saturday night, one thing that stood out to me watching that defense, all the man coverage they played. Like, you don't play man coverage unless you trust your secondary, unless you trust those guys to go mano-a-mano with guys like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Kyron Lacey. And Malik Neighbors got his, to be real. He's one of the best wide receivers in the country, very quietly, might I add. But outside of him, no other receiver had more than 3 catches and 40 yards receiving. Trust is earned. You don't put those guys on an island out there and allow them to just play man-to-man unless you feel good about where they stand in that scheme and how you like your matchup. In Alabama, they wouldn't just play man coverage just to play man coverage. Again, it goes back to trust in their guys. And so the way that they're playing and the output that teams are getting against them, I mean, Alabama came into that game last week, came into that game against LSU, allowing only 200 yards passing a game right around. They came out of that game just a little over 200 yards passing a game allowed. Alabama has a really good secondary. Now, week to week, of course, there's matchups that you would like to try and take away and minimize, and you're kind of going to have to take your lumps whenever you play man coverage. But again, if you're able to win the majority of your matchups, the majority, not every single rep, it's not realistic to imagine you're going to win 100% of your reps, but if you can win the majority of those battles, you're going to end up winning the war outside if you're Alabama on the secondary. And when you're able to do that and just keep from getting thrashed and throttled in the pass game, like we saw them unfortunately have happened to them against Texas, well, then you have to play at Alabama's pace. Because if you're not going to score 40 against us, then we can dictate terms to you. We can run the football. We can limit possessions. Again, going back to their identity they already have offensively. So to put it simply, complementary football is being played. They're not allowing those throttle plays that they allowed early in the year against Texas. You still lose a matchup here and there, but it's not a consistent theme of, well, we got to now chase you and keep pace. And even if they do, Alabama, with what they have offensively and Jalen Mirloe running the show now, how confident they are, the ownership he's taken of the offense, I think that's provided the ability for them, quite frankly, to be able to keep pace much better than they could early in the year. So here's what it comes down to for me. Probably the most important thing that Alabama has going for them outside of the X's and O's and the personnel and the scheme, Alabama is not a complacent team. Not just because these guys weren't there for some of the success that Nick Saban's had throughout his time in Tuscaloosa. They've seen it. It's a big reason why they went to Alabama. But on top of that, they have a loss already they've had to endure. That game week 2 against Texas where they took that out, and I keep going back to it because I think it's kind of the origin story of this team. They looked their mortality in the face. You're sitting there with one loss with the rest of your season ahead of you and saying, okay, if we don't figure it out, if we don't turn all that nonsense off of we think we're this or we're that because we got the script A going for us, like, we're going to lose another game. And so I think the sense of urgency and the refusal to give into any complacency, and then you pair that with the identity they have right now offensively and the fact that they're able to kind of utilize the talent they have on this roster, like, that's scary for the rest of college football because Alabama is only going to get better from here with that lack of complacency. They refuse to rest on their laurels. And again, I think that is scary for everyone else that has to play them the rest of the way. So Nick Saban's lost his fastball. Nick Saban's no longer the GOAT. Nick Saban's not this. He's not that. All that nonsense we heard after week 2, after the USF game, after the Texas loss, like all that volume, pretty quiet right now. There's a very big reason for that because Alabama's now the one making the noise. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't miss a minute of what we got going on right here on the Hard Count on the On3 YouTube channel. Again, pressing towards 200,000 subscribers. Want y'all a part of it. We are live tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, giving you our predictions for all the big games in week 11 in the college football season. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of the Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.